Okay, so whenever we look for life out in the universe, we have this one golden rule, right? Follow the water. But what if that rule is actually holding us back? Today, we're going to take a hard look at that idea and ask a pretty fundamental question. Is our focus on water just a kind of cosmic short-sightedness?
You know, the great Carl Sagan himself actually used the word chauvinism to talk about this kind of unconscious bias that our way of doing things is the only way. Now, he did end up defending the focus on water and carbon, but he also cracked open the door to a really fascinating thought. Are we just unable to imagine other kinds of life? And that's exactly what we're going to explore.
For decades, our entire search for alien life has pretty much been a search for water. It's the whole reason we have the habitable zone, that, Goldilocks region around a star where it's not too hot, not too cold, but just right for liquid water to pool on a planet's surface.
But here's where it gets interesting. Scientists are starting to wonder if this whole view is maybe a little geocentric, Earth-centric. We think water is perfect for life because, hey, it's perfect for our life here. But what if some of the very things we celebrate about water are actually huge disadvantages on a bigger, cosmic scale?
This is where the whole story takes a really cool twist. We're going to look at some of water's most famous, life-giving qualities and see how they could actually be a planet's worst nightmare.
So, take this classic example we all learned in school. Water ice floats. And we're told this is amazing because it acts like a blanket, insulating the liquid water underneath and protecting all the fish in the winter. Great for Earth. But zoom out to a planetary scale. That floating ice is really bright. It has a high albedo, which means it reflects sunlight back into space. That cools the planet, which makes more ice, which reflects more sunlight. You see where this is going, right? It's a feedback loop that can send a planet spiraling into a runaway ice age. So a property we think of as a feature could actually be a catastrophic bug.
And how about water's liquid range? We always hear that it's just uniquely wide, but that's really only true at the specific air pressure we have here on Earth. Just look at formamide. It stays liquid over a much wider range of temperatures. Or ammonia. Yeah, its range is smaller at our pressure, but on other planets with higher pressures, its liquid range becomes absolutely enormous. Turns out our perspective has been pretty biased by our sea level experience.
So, okay, if not water, then what? Well, let's take a quick tour of our very own solar system to explore some truly exotic, mind-bending possibilities. We're going to see how totally different liquids could host entirely different kinds of life. We're going to check out 3 incredible candidates: the wild sulfuric acid clouds of Venus, the freezing cold methane oceans of Titan, and the ammonia-laced clouds of Jupiter. Each one presents some pretty gnarly challenges, but also some really unique opportunities for life as we definitely do not know it. Let's start with Venus. Its clouds are made of concentrated sulfuric acid. Any molecule from you or me would be ripped to shreds in seconds. But here's the absolute shocker. A recent analysis showed that thousands of other complex chemicals, things we've made in labs, could actually stay stable for years in that acid. So while it's a death trap for our kind of biology, it doesn't rule out biology entirely. It just means you need a completely different chemical toolkit. Okay, next up, let's journey way out to Titan, Saturn's biggest moon. This place is a world where rivers, lakes, and oceans are filled with methane and ethane instead of water. It is unbelievably cold, and the liquid there is nonpolar, the total opposite of water. And what we've found there just perfectly illustrates the potential for something weird and wonderful. Data from NASA found a molecule called vinyl cyanide just hanging out in Titan's atmosphere. It rains down and collects in the lakes. And the concentration is so high that in one of the big northern seas, Ligia Mare, there's enough of this stuff to form 10 million cells per cubic centimeter. 10 million! But what kind of cells could they possibly be?
Well, they wouldn't be our kind of cells, that's for sure. Our cell membranes, which are made of phospholipids, would completely fall apart in methane. So scientists came up with a theory for something called azotosomes. These would be cell membranes built from that vinyl cyanide, and they'd be perfectly stable and flexible in liquid methane. It's a completely alien solution to a universal biological problem: how to build a cell.
And finally, we've got ammonia. Now this one's a polar solvent, so it's a lot like water chemically, but the difference is they're really important. It's not as good at dissolving salts, and the hydrophobic effect is much weaker. That effect is basically what makes oily things clump together in water, and it's what drives the formation of our cell membranes and the folding of our proteins.
life in ammonia would probably need a whole different chemical foundation, using carbon-nitrogen bonds where we use carbon-oxygen. It's plausible, for sure, but it presents some pretty big hurdles.
Okay, so after that wild tour of these exotic worlds, it's pretty easy to start thinking that water is just one choice on a whole menu of options. But now, we've got to come back to Earth and look at the very powerful counterargument for why water might, just maybe, be the one perfect solvent for life after all. It all comes down to something called the water paradox. Here's the deal. Water is absolutely essential for all the machinery of life to work. But at the exact same time, it's a reactive molecule that's actively trying to break down the very things life is built from, like DNA and proteins. So how on earth can life exist in a liquid that's constantly trying to dissolve it?
The answer is that this paradox, it isn't a flaw, it's water's actual superpower. See, water performs this unbelievable balancing act. On one hand, it weakens the really strong forces between molecules, stopping them from just locking together forever. But at the same time, it strengthens the really weak forces, like the hydrophobic effect, which gently nudges other molecules to organize themselves into useful things like membranes and perfectly folded proteins. It's this one-of-a-kind ability to tone down the strong and beef up the weak that puts everything into that just right Goldilocks zone for the beautiful, complicated dance of life.
So where does all of this leave us? I mean, water might be uniquely good at what it does, but the universe is a ridiculously big and varied place. The real takeaway here is that we have to start thinking bigger. At the end of the day, it's not about picking a winner in a water versus not water contest. It's about realizing that the habitable zone shouldn't just be about where you can find liquid water. It should be about any zone where a planet can support any kind of liquid solvent long enough for complex chemistry to get started and keep going. We have to start looking for signs of chemistry, not just signs of H2O.
So here it is, a final look at our contenders. Water, it's the master of balance, but it can make climates unstable. Methane is stable over huge temperature ranges and allows for cool stuff like azotosomes, but it's so cold that reactions would be super slow. Sulfuric acid has a huge liquid range, but it'll dissolve almost anything we know. And ammonia, it's a close cousin to water, but it just doesn't have that same chemical finesse. Each one offers a totally different potential path to life. And this brings us to the final, really profound question that was raised in a National Academy's report. Titan has all the right stuff. It's got a liquid solvent, it's got tons of carbon molecules, and it's got energy. So, if life isn't some 1 in a trillion miracle, but just a natural outcome of chemistry, then shouldn't we expect to find it there? It's a question that really challenges our Earth-first perspective and forces us to imagine possibilities far, far beyond our own watery little world.